Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. This week we join the Doctor as he faces new dangers and makes new friends in The Face of Evil. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions and the villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on this story, so as always, to join the discussion you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TimeTeamp, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteamp@teamproductions.com. Now, before we jump into Paddy's lovely recap, I should apologise for the fact that we've been dead silent for about a month and a half. That was my fault. Two things. One, job got in the way. Stupid real life. Second thing, I went to Vegas.
Yes, because you're a massive nerd.
Yes, I am. And I got to meet some of our lovely friends from Mission Log and a lot of people from the Mission Log Patreon group and whatever, which was fantastic. But yeah, so those of you who have been waiting for this episode, who've been waiting to hear our thoughts on the Face of Evil and the characters introduced here, my apologies sincerely for the delay. It was essentially my fault.
I have a feeling now that people are just kind of they were really taking the fact that you didn't want, you hadn't seen past Sarah Jane consecutively, and you're like, no, I'm just not going to do it anymore. It ends with Sarah Jane leaving.
Yeah, no, that's not. Yeah. But one of our lovely loyal listeners and friends, Paul, did remind me the other day that it had been many, many weeks, and so again, I apologize. And hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. Cool.
So, Paddy, over to you.
Cool.
Recap, right. Please.
Recap. Part 1. In a meeting hall, the men of the 7-team tribe gather to determine the fate of one of their female members. They all agree, although some of them do so reluctantly, that she must be banished, but one of them, Thomas, tries to defend her. The female, whose name is Leela, says that she doesn't want their pity, and they simply told them the truth. The tribal shaman, Neva, says that she is guilty of blasphemy by questioning the directive of their god Zoannan, who ordered them to attack their enemy, the Tesh. Leela defiantly states that there is no Zoannan, but the tribal chief, Andor, speaks up before Neva can retort. He asks Leela if she is willing to face the test of the Horda for her statements, but she refuses. Andor opens the challenge to the rest of the tribe, and her father, Sole, says that he will take it on. Leela begs him to stop, saying that she will recant her statements, but Andor tells her that doing so will only shame her father. Soleil's screams fill the air, and Leela is banished from the tribe, with Andor saying that she must be off their land before sunrise, or she would be brought back to face the test herself. Elsewhere, the TARDIS lands in a petrified forest, and the Doctor gets out, seeing that he has not landed at his intended destination of Hyde Park. He decides to take a look around and see if there is any clues to his location. Meanwhile, Leela is being pursued through the forest by a pair of hunters. She manages to get the drop on one of them and kills him with her crossbow, but another one appears and prepares to kill her while she reloads. However, he is killed by Thomas, who says that he has come to bring her back. She says that she can't go back and intends to keep going into the realm beyond. Thomas warns her of the creatures lurking there, but she says that they are just stories and that whatever is out there she can handle by herself. She tells him to go back and warns him to be wary of Caleb, the one who brought the accusations against her, as he is planning something. The Doctor makes his way through the forest, whistling to himself whilst he does so, but he stops when he hears a creature approaching him. At that moment, Leela, who was also avoiding the creature, trips and lands in front of the Doctor. He greets her, but she warily calls him the Evil One. He is taken aback by this, but introduces himself and offers her a jelly baby. She recalls in horror, saying that the stories of his fondness for eating babies are true, but he says that they are only sweets. As she inspects one of the sweets, he notices more growling and asks if she knows what they are. She tells him that they are his invisible servants, and this gives him an idea. He takes out an old alarm clock out of his pockets and says that since they are invisible, the creatures are more than likely drawn to the vibrations in order to hunt their prey. He tells her to quietly follow him and only run when he tells her to. They slowly make their way through the forest, but the Doctor ends up falling to the ground, drawing the attention of the creatures. However, the alarm clock goes off and draws them away, allowing the Doctor and Leela to escape. They put as much distance between themselves and the creatures and eventually come to a rest, with Leela saying that they have crossed the boundary line that the creatures never approach. The Doctor asks why they don't follow, and Leela again tells him that he should know as they are his servants. The Doctor again says that he is not the Evil One, and says that there must be some sort of fence or barrier that stops the creatures from following them. Back at the 7-team village, Thomas meets Caleb and tells him about the hunters, saying that they were sent by Neva. Caleb says that Neva is getting nervous that his power will be brought into question. Caleb says that if the upcoming raid fails, then Neva will look like a fraud, and that will allow him to take control of the tribe away from him and Andor, who he says is a puppet king. In his hut, Neva receives a message from Zoannan, whose voice comes from a series of antiquated-looking computers, who says that Leela is still alive and is back across the boundary. Zoannan tells him to destroy her and the person with her. The Doctor and Leela eventually find a relay circuit, partially buried in the ground. He explains that it is the thing that keeps the creatures away, causing them mental pain if they get too close. He says that it is highly advanced technology and wonders who could have put it there. Leela says that it must belong to Zoannan and explains to the Doctor who he is, saying that he is held captive by the Evil One and his followers, who are called the Tesh. The Doctor asks where Zoannan is, and she says that he is within a structure called the Black Wall, which holds paradise. Sensing that this is more than religious terminology, the Doctor asks if it is a real location, and Leela starts to lead him to it. They make their way through the forest, and Leela suddenly tells him to take cover and be quiet. The Doctor is confused by her actions, but suddenly 2 arrows hit the tree where he is standing, and a voice tells him to surrender. The Doctor tells Leela to leave, but she refuses, and he calls out to the assailants, questioning their shooting skill. A quartet of men emerge from the trees and demand to know where Leela is. The Doctor turns around to speak to them, and they too refer to him as the Evil One, blessing themselves as they do so. The Doctor plays into their belief and threatens to turn them into toads if they approach. He then comments on their blessing, which he says is reminiscent of the checking of the safety seals of a spacesuit. He then uses their distraction and draws out a jelly baby, threatening to kill a nearby warrior with it unless they drop their weapons. The leader, though, calls his bluff, and the Doctor demands to be brought to their leader instead. In the meeting hall, Andor confronts Neva over the lack of game for the hunters to kill, and Neva says Zoannan is withholding his blessing until he is freed. He says that the time for the attack will be soon, and the warriors should be gathered. After he leaves, Thomas emerges and tells Andor of the attempt to kill Leela and accuses him of having knowledge of it. Andor angrily denies the claim and tells him that he is not to speak out against the attack either. They then leave, and once they're gone, Neva appears, having listened to their conversation. Later, as the preparations are being made for the attack, the Doctor is brought to the meeting hall and Neva starts a warding off ceremony. The Doctor recognizes the relic that he is using for the ceremony as an ultra beam accelerator and tells him to be careful, as it could contain a deadly residual charge. Neva takes his nervousness and his request to be set free as proof of his nature of the Evil One. Andor demands that he release Zoannan, but the Doctor says that he is not trapping him. Andor takes out a knife to kill him in order to free Zoannan, but Neva stops him, saying that he needs to perform the battle litany first. Andor agrees, and a guard is sent to summon the warriors. The guard rings the summoning bell, which is a large piece of sheet metal with the words Survey Team 6 written on the side of it. The Doctor explains to Andor that he is not the Evil One, and that his tribe and its society seem to be built around the equipment left over from ancient space travelers. A doubtful Andor leaves in anger and tells the guard to ignore the Doctor. A short while later, Neva returns wearing the remains of a spacesuit as a ceremonial robe and gives the guard a secret instruction. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched by Leela, who managed to sneak back into the village. Neva then goes and leads the warriors in the battle litany, which calls for the murder of the Tesh, who betrayed the Seven Team. Leela sneaks into the meeting hall and stabs the guard with a Janus thorn, which she explains to the Doctor first paralyzes and then kills any who are scratched with it. Leela says that they need to leave, as the litany will soon call for his death. The Doctor asks if she knows the whole litany, and she says that she does, leading him through a hole in the wall that she had made. Another member of the tribe tries to climb through the wall after them, but Leela stabs him with another Janus thorn, cutting off their pursuit. The Doctor angrily tells her not to use them again, and they flee as the rest of the warriors are summoned to give chase. She leads them through the forest, and they eventually come to a clearing which shows a gigantic stone carving of a face. Leela says that it is the image of the Evil One, and the Doctor sees that the carving is of his face. Part 2. The Doctor says that he can't remember coming to the planet before, and says that he may have landed on another part of it. Leela says that nothing exists beyond the boundary, bar the wastelands, and the Doctor says that they need to go back to the village. Leela opposes the idea, but he says that the tribe will be too busy preparing for the raid. Back in the village, Andor tells Neva that their warriors refuse to attack whilst the Doctor is loose, but Neva says the window for opportunity is closing and they must need to attack immediately. He says that Zoannan has decreed the attack must go ahead and that victory is assured, but Andor warns him of the price of failure. Neva goes to commune with Zoannan, but he gets no response, and he is called away to join the raiding party. Unbeknownst to him, he is being observed by the Doctor and Leela, who wait for him to leave so they can examine the relics in his room. The Doctor examines a nearby helmet on a pedestal, and the voice of Zoannan suddenly comes from it, asking for Neva. Leela covers her ears in fear, but the Doctor explains that it is just a radio signal coming through and not the voice of a god. He starts to speak to Zoannan, who seems to be happy to hear the Doctor's voice, as if he recognizes it, and says that at last he will be free. A confused Doctor asks who Zoannan really is, and he replies saying, "Don't I know?" Worried, the Doctor asks Leela if the voice sounded familiar, and she says that it sounds like his. The Doctor says they need to go to the boundary wall. They make their way to it, and the Doctor realizes that it is a time barrier. He explains that there is no way through it unless it is bridged, and they realize that the raiding party is walking into a trap, and they rush to stop them. Andor orders the charge, and the warriors rush to the wall, but several of them are cut down by beams of light, including Neva. The survivors return to the village, with Caleb being the first amongst them, and is greeted by the doctor, who has deduced that they wouldn't be able to stop the raid, and so went to the village instead. Leela emerges from hiding and holds him at knife point, and he reveals the outcome of the raid. Leela accuses him of cowardice, but the doctor cuts off their argument and asks Caleb for his help. Caleb agrees, saying that he doesn't believe the doctor to be the evil one, but asks to know everything. The doctor begins explaining about the barrier, but Caleb uses the distraction to stab Leela with a Janus thorn. Caleb says that he will use the revelation of the doctor not being the evil one to take away control of the tribe from Neva and Andor. Suddenly Thomas bursts in and blames the failure of the attack on Caleb. The doctor turns the table on him by tripping him up and taking up Leela's crossbow. He then gets Thomas and Caleb to take Leela to Neva's chamber, holding the latter at crossbow point. The doctor has them place her in Neva's bed and tells Thomas to guard Caleb. He says the bed is actually a bio bed and he intends to use it to create a cure for the Janus poison. Caleb uses Thomas's concern for Leela to distract him as the doctor works and then flees to raise the alarm. The doctor tells Thomas to keep guard whilst he administers the antidote to Leela, who slowly starts to come around. Thomas says that more worries are coming, and the doctor tells him to take a protesting Leela to safety. He goes into the meeting hall where he is cornered by Caleb and his men, as well as a returning Neva. They are joined shortly by Leela and Thomas, who were captured by Andor and the remnants of the raiding party. Caleb's followers start to blame Neva for the failure of the attack, but he and Andor said it was the doctor who defeated them. The doctor and Leela protest his innocence, saying that it was a trap, but Leela makes matters worse by saying that it was Zoannan who laid the trap. Neva orders him to be sent to face the Horda. Caleb and Neva then argue whether or not the test will kill the doctor, thereby questioning his godhood and giving Caleb the advantage in the power struggle. The doctor is brought to the Horda pit, which is filled with small snake-like creatures that Caleb describes as being similar to piranhas in their speed and lethality. The doctor is given a crossbow and told to stand on a platform. Leela gives him a warning about the test and is slapped by one of Caleb's men for her interference. In anger, the doctor flicks one of the Horda that Caleb showed him onto the men, who then takes off screaming into the forest as it bites into him. The test then starts as one of the warriors starts to turn a crank and the platform starts to separate, revealing a pit of Horda beneath it. The doctor sees a stone weight being lowered, which coincides with the separating of the platform, and he realizes that's what Leela's clue was in relation to. At that moment, Leela manages to get free of her bonds and attempts to rescue the doctor, but she is soon stopped. The doctor then fires the crossbow and severs the rope holding the weight, thereby stopping the platform from separating. He thanks Leela for her clue, but chalks his success up to his marksmanship, which he says he learned from William Tell. He orders Thomas to be freed and then goes to Neva's room, where he finds him in a trance speaking with Zoannan, who is now speaking in a different voice. The doctor addresses Zoannan, which reverts back to his mimicry of the doctor's voice, and says that it has decided to kill him. He reveals that he's turned off the protective relays and that his invisible creatures will soon attack. The doctor tells Leela and Thomas to inform the warriors about the creatures and to place them on guard around the village whilst he starts to tinker with the equipment in Neva's room. When he comes back, he reveals that the equipment belonged to a planetary survey team, saying that that is where the 7 team's name comes from. Caleb asks if they were the captors of the survey team or their descendants, but the doctor says that he doesn't know. The doctor then hands Thomas an ad hoc blaster and says that it has a recharge capacity, but he needs to use it sparingly. He then goes with Leela to set up a sonic barrier to try and keep the creatures out. The doctor then tries to figure out a way to bridge the time barrier, but says that he would have to dismantle the TARDIS to do so. Leela asks him, since the barrier is supposedly impenetrable to everything, how have they been able to hear Zoannan, leading the doctor to call her a genius before heading back to the village. The doctor finds Neva in a trance again and begins to question him about the voice, but Neva only repeats the phrase, "Yes, master." The doctor then pretends to be Zoannan and again asks where the voice comes from, and Neva says that it comes from the shrine in his room. The doctor says that he knows where the bridge is and makes his way with Leela to the giant face carving. As they make their way there, they hear the warning bell from the village, which Leela says must be from a panicking guard. They arrive at the face and make their way into the moat, which is actually a tunnel into the mountain. Back near the village, Thomas and Andor go into the forest to investigate the source of the alarm. Andor is suddenly attacked by one of the invisible creatures, and Thomas attacks it with using the blaster. The blast reveals the creature, which actually resembles the doctor's floating head, screaming. Andor dies, and Thomas continues to use the blaster at the oncoming creatures. Part 3. Caleb arrives and calls Thomas back to safety. Thomas tells him what happened, and Caleb says that they should get back to the village, where he intends to take over leadership of the tribe. In the tunnel, the doctor and Leela see a figure wearing a similar spacesuit to Neva's, only this one is fully intact. They watch as he disappears through a section of the wall, and they go to take a look at it. Through another tunnel exit, the doctor sees the remains of a spaceship, and he remembers his previous visit to the planet. Leela calls him back and asks him to help him find the figure, calling him a Tesh. The doctor tells her that the wall is actually an illusion and guides her through it into an anti-grav transporter, which takes them to the ship. Meanwhile, in a chamber with several large screens, several voices of Xoanon rejoice that they will soon be won, once they are destroyed. A short while later, the Doctor and Leela find themselves in a shrine similar to the one in Neva's chambers. The Doctor asks Leela to recount the litany of battle and realizes what is after occurring as she speaks it. He tells her that the survey team are the descendants of the ship's survey team, and that the Tesh are descendants of the ship's technicians. He begins to tell her about his previous visit, which unbeknownst to him would lead to the current rivalry, but they are interrupted by several Tesh, all wearing clothes reminiscent of a flight uniform. Leela aims her crossbow at them, but one of them stares at her intently, and she slowly lowers it to the floor before going unconscious. The Doctor tells him to stop, but he assures him that she is not damaged and has some other Tesh take her away. He then venerates himself before the Doctor, addressing him as Lord and introducing himself as Jabal, captain of the Tesh. The Doctor asks if the Tesh have a holy purpose, and Jabal responds that they serve Xoanon and tend to his sanctums. The Doctor then realizes that the two groups' differing skill sets and capabilities seem to be a result of some type of eugenics experiment. He asks where Xoanon is, and Jabal says that he is all around him, and begins spouting religious diatribes, but the Doctor ignores him and starts looking for a working computer to try and stop Xoanon. Meanwhile, Leela has been taken to a particle analyzer room and strapped to a table to be killed by a beam in 15 minutes. Not finding a working computer, the Doctor asks where Xoanon's main shrine is, and Jabal tells him the deck that it is on. Before he leaves, he sees Leela on a security monitor, and he asks Jabal what is happening. Jabal says that she will be analysed so they can see how the Seven team have gained the ability to break through the weak points in the barrier, but the Doctor retorts that Xoanon is the one who is letting them in. Jabal calls him a liar and declares that he is not the Lord of Time that was prophesied to come save them. The Doctor goes to rescue Leela, but Jayla stops him with his mental powers, and he is taken to the chamber and strapped down near Leela. He wakes back up with 30 seconds remaining on the timer, and he instructs Leela to close her eyes. He then uses a small hand mirror he had hidden up his sleeve to reflect the beam back into its housing, destroying it. It shorts out the entire system, and their straps release them, allowing them to escape. This is reported to Jabal, who orders them both to be killed. As they make their way through the ship, the Doctor explains to Leela that Xoanon is actually the ship's computer, which has developed a schizophrenic personality. He explains that he helped program Xoanon in the past, but forgot to remove his own memory print from the data core, resulting in the multiple personalities the computer now exhibits. Unbeknownst to them, they are being monitored by Xoanon. They eventually find an auxiliary communications room, and the Doctor looks for an active terminal. He turns on one of the monitors, which shows the camera feed near the village, and they watch as the Seven Team warriors retreat. Leela says the monsters, which the Doctor says are psychokinetic projections from Xoanon, have broken through the defenses. She says she needs to go back, but the Doctor says that there is nothing that she can do to help them from there. The Doctor then picks up a communicator and attempts to contact Neva, telling him to bring the tribe through the mouth of the carving so that they will be safe from the monsters. Leela says the Tesh will kill them, but the Doctor says that at least they will have a chance against them. Neva agrees, and the Doctor and Leela make their way to Xoanon's core. At the core, they find it guarded by a Tesh, but using the Doctor's hat as a decoy, Leela manages to incapacitate him. The Doctor tells her to wait outside to keep watch whilst he goes inside to face Xoanon. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the statue, Caleb and Thomas kill a guard patrolling the tunnel. Caleb tells Thomas to bring the rest of the tribe whilst he and another hunter scout on ahead. In Xoanon's core, several voices of different ages and genders ask the Doctor who he is. The Doctor identifies himself and says that he has come to fix his error. He explains that when he first encountered the ship, it had crashed on the planet centuries beforehand, and he attempted to fix the data core by forging a mental link with it. However, the data core hadn't been damaged as the technicians on the ship had kept working on it for generations, trying to make a perpetual power source for it. As a result, they accidentally created Xoanon. When the Doctor connected to Xoanon, the computer imprinted on him and took his personality traits. Unfortunately, the adopted personality conflicted with Xoanon's own natural personality, resulting in the current state of mental distress. Outside, Leela does her best to keep the Tesh guards at bay, killing several of them before the energy in her blaster runs out. Inside the chamber, the Doctor tries to get Xoanon to see that he is not a part of it, but the computer refuses to acknowledge his separate existence. Several images of the Doctor's face appear on the holographic screens, screaming "no" over and over again. The Doctor then faints for the psychokinetic output, and then Xoanon asks, in a child's voice, "Who am I?" Part 4. Outside the corridor, Leela draws her knife and prepares to fight off the guards. The power suddenly grows dim, and the guards back off fearfully. Leela grabs one of them and demands to know what is going on, and he says it is a sign of the end times. Leela picks up his gun and enters Xoanon's chamber. She sees the Doctor on the floor and begins shooting at the screens, forcing Xoanon to retreat. She drags the Doctor outside and helps him come to. She then asks why Xoanon wanted to kill him, and the Doctor says it's because he contradicts his existence. The doctor then notices the dimmed lighting as well as the strange smell, and he hurriedly stops Leela from picking up her gun, which she had placed near a wall. The doctor shows her that the walls have become electrified. He then wonders why only the walls were electrified, not the floors, but he is suddenly attacked by the guard who Leela interrogated, who now seems to be in some sort of trance. Leela attacks the guard, but he easily throws her off and tries to force the doctor into the wall. The doctor and the guard fight, and the doctor manages to kick him into the wall, killing him. The doctor then says they need to leave, and Leela picks up her gun, noticing that the power seems to have fixed itself. Meanwhile, Thomas and the others see the ship, and Neva claims that it is proof that Zoannon is a divine being, but he secretly confides to Caleb that he intends to kill the doctor. Back in the ship, the doctor is going through a supply chamber and voices his belief that the very stupid and the very powerful share the same trait of altering the facts to fit their viewpoints, as opposed to the other way around. As he is speaking, Leela becomes possessed by Zoannon and attempts to shoot the doctor, who dives for cover when he sees her sneaking up on him. The doctor then takes cover and uses his own mental abilities to take over Leela in her hypnotized state and convinces her to drop the gun. He then brings her back around and says that they need to go to the main control room. Jable is alerted to the attack by the Seva team, and he orders a trap to be laid for them and for the guards to draw them in by pretending to retreat. As they advance, Thomas begins to suspect that they are being led into a trap, but Caleb says that he wants to defeat the Tesh once and for all and ignores his warnings. Meanwhile, the doctor and Leela arrive at the main control room, and the doctor hacks into the main console and brings up all the security and system monitoring feeds. Leela notices a flashing light nearby, and the doctor reveals that Zoannon has put the atomic generators into overload so that they will explode and destroy the ship and most of the planet. He then begins to work on accessing Zoannon's mainframe in an attempt to rewrite his personality. Zoannon senses this and begins possessing the remaining Tesh, the Seva team, and Leela in an attempt to stop him. However, Neva seems to be unaffected, and he takes up a laser cannon and follows on after the others. Leela draws her knife and attempts to stab an unaware doctor, but he moves at the last second, and she stabs the console that he was working on, passing out from the electric charge. The doctor then puts her to one side after making sure she is alive, but before he can return to his task, he is apprehended by the possessed Tesh and Seva team. An apparition of Zoannon appears, and it orders them to kill him, but Neva appears and tries to shoot the apparition. However, he is vaporized by it. The doctor uses Zoannon's distraction to finish the headset that he was working on, and he puts it on, plugging it into the mainframe, and begins to rewrite Zoannon's personality. The atomic generators go back to their standard setting, whilst the Tesh and Seva team regain their senses. Later, the doctor wakes up to find Leela eating some chocolate that she took from his pockets. She reveals that he has been unconscious for 2 days, and he fearfully asks what has happened to Zoannon. She tells him that there has been no sign of activity from him, and that the Tesh are avoiding the core of the ship. She says that there is currently a truce between the two factions, and he decides to check the core, giving a curious Leela permission to come as well. In the core, a much more sedate Zoannon, speaking in a new voice, welcomes them inside. Leela asks why he pitted the two tribes against each other, and he reveals that he used them to act out the torment of his conflicted psyche. Leela condemns Zoannon for his cruelty, and the computer acknowledges its fault, thanking the doctor for freeing it. The doctor admits that he is to blame as well for the mistake, but Zoannon doesn't blame him. He then invites him to sit down so they can discuss how to prevent it from happening again. Meanwhile, Caleb, Thomas, and Jabal are arguing over how the tribes can move forward, but they are at an impasse. The doctor arrives and tells him that Zoannon has offered to aid both tribes in their development. As a gesture of goodwill, he has created a self-destruct button so that they can use it if he ever reverts back to his evil nature. None of them take the button, and it vanishes, as Zoannon is pleased that they trust him. The two tribes revert to their bickering as to who should lead them, and the doctor quietly slips away. Thomas nominates Leela, but she refuses, saying that she doesn't want it, and turns to the doctor for aid, and chases after him when she notices that he is gone. She finds him at the TARDIS and asks to go with him. He gently refuses, but she rushes past him into the TARDIS, and he tells her to get out. He goes in after her, telling her to stop touching things as the ship dematerializes. End of the story.
So thank you very much, Paddy, for your recap.
You're very, very welcome. Are you ready to step back into the trivia spot?
I can try at the very least. Okay, let's do trivia for The Face of Evil. Trivia point number 1. Tricia never seen this. You knew that already. Anyway, on to main trivia.
Yes.
The air date for the story is the 1st of January to the 22nd of January 1977. The writer for the story is Chris Bowker?
I think it might be
Boucher.
I think it might be Boucher.
Oh, Boucher. Maybe that. Yep. And this is the first of 3 stories written by Chris. We'll see his work again in The Robots of Death and The Image of the Fendal. He also wrote several Doctor Who novels, including Last Man Running, Corpse Maker, Science Fiction, I like that, it's PSI, and Fiction, and Match of the Day. The director of the story is Pennant Roberts. This is the first of 6 stories directed by Pennant. We'll see his work again in The Sunmakers, The Pirate Planet, Shada, Warriors of the Deep, and Time Lash.
Time Lash. No, it's Time Lash. It is Time Lash.
It is Time Lash. Cool.
Also, just because you said Match of the Day, Paul, who we mentioned earlier, is a big football fan, so I can just imagine his glee at the concept of the Doctor taking on Des Lynam as a villain.
All I have in my mind is like do 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 do. I don't even know if that is the Match of the Day theme song.
No, that's the Sunday game. That's like that's really. I can't even think of the Match of the Day theme tune. The Sunday game was like Ga. It's like, it's what they play on. Okay. It's what they do. It's what they do for fucking hurling and football games.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Anyway, going back to point. Pennant Roberts passed away in 2010. Interestingly,
sorry. Yeah. Match of the Day is yeah, there we go.
So, interestingly, like a story with a couple of firsts. So, first time for this writer, first time for this director, first time for this companion. Couple of firsts in the story. So the story had the working titles of The Tower of Emilo and The Day God Went Mad. I can kind of understand, but they didn't go with that one. Philip Hinchcliffe, objected to the latter for what might be considered obvious reasons to you and me, but actually he just felt it wasn't in keeping with other titles. He didn't really care if it offended people. I think at this point Philip was probably beyond caring.
Yeah.
When
I think he was. I think he was like pretty much like a god unto himself at this point, seeing how successful his run on the show was going.
Well, also, like, I think this was after last week's episode. I don't know if he was already on the way out at this point.
I think he was. No, he was already on the way out at this point, I think.
Yeah. So, when broadcast, this was originally billed as the start of a new series because there was a 6-week gap between the final episode of The Deadly Assassin and the start of this one. It was originally sort of, we're going to have the new series, but actually, obviously for us, it wasn't. So this story has what I think is only our second fourth wall break in Doctor Who. The first being by William Hartnell in the story that was really good, but the episode of that story that shall not be named. Story being The Daleks' Master Plan. Where Bill Hartnell basically wishes Merry Christmas, I think it was.
Yeah, because it was broadcast on Christmas Day.
Yeah. So here we have the Doctor directly addressing the camera and the audience on emerging from the TARDIS in part 1. I think this might be only the second time they've done that.
Yeah, because the only other time we can think of is like, do you remember like that weird interlude scene they did for like the connection between Revenge of the Cybermen and Terror of the Zygons, where he's in the cinema?
Yeah, but that was more of
that's more.
That wasn't in the episode. Like,
yeah, it's more of a skit than anything. But that's the only time I can think of. Yeah, so no, I think this is the second four-wall break.
So interesting that this aired on New Year's Day. So I wonder if that's why they did it.
Maybe
either that, or they're quickly realizing that the Doctor without a companion has no one to talk to.
Actually, just on the subject, because for my birthday, Trish got me a really cool book. So brace for Trish's laughter. The name of the book is Space Helmet for a Cow. It's basically, it's the history of the classic era of the show. And at this stage, Tom Baker was really trying to do a lot of ad-libbing and putting himself into the scripts. So I can imagine that this was something that he probably did himself.
Yeah, because also at this point in time, Tom didn't really think he needed a companion. After Liz left, Tom asked, could it just be him on his own?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is interesting. The Janus thorns that Leela uses were originally meant to be pronounced with the first syllable rhyming with can, so Janus rather than Janus. Rather than the elongated A sound. But apparently Tom Baker pointed out that Janus Thorne sounds like the name of an out-of-work soap actress. That's why it was changed to Janice Thorne, but I pronounced
Janus Thorne.
Janice Thorne.
As like, yeah, so like imagine like there's like an E in there, an extra E in there as well.
The story was originally written with 2 endings. One with Leela going off with the Doctor, and one where she didn't, because obviously they were trying to decide what they were going to do with the character of Leela, if she was going to be the new companion and so on. It doesn't explain explicitly when the Doctor repaired the Starfall 7's computer. So, it's clearly before this story, the Doctor's been to this planet. And he remembers it, so it's not a case of he will eventually come to this planet and cause this whole thing to kick off. It's not like a continuous cycle. He has been there before. The novelization suggests that the earlier visit may have been in the moment when Sarah sees him begin to leave in the TARDIS. So that he did actually leave and arrive back, like a millisecond of a difference. So you always see the TARDIS starting to dematerialize, and then he sort of comes back. He's like, what do you mean I can't, or whatever. So the novelization kind of suggests that it may have been then that he actually left and came back, and that could be part of like why the computer gets so addled, is because he was still like just post regeneration. We don't get any of that information though in the television version. That is purely just a novelization creation. I think it kind of makes sense, do you know? Because we don't have a lot of Fourth Doctor time where Sarah isn't there. And the only other thing would be like have it be sometime after, say, Pyramids and before Hand of Fear, and Sarah was there. She just isn't mentioned in the story because it's not relevant. But if the Doctor was meant to be there on his own, that really would have been the only time it could have been.
Well, also, like, if you could think that after the Deadly Assassin, so like it could be the multitude of adventures he would have.
Yeah, in like between, how many adventures did he have between Deadly Assassin
and here? Yeah.
So Leela's costume, which a lot of people really liked. It was designed by John Bloomfield, and it was actually Louise Jameson that convinced them to put the flap on the back. Originally did not have a flap on the back of it. So she made them put that in. In the sort of behind the sofa segment, was the kind of that like Leela's costume was kind of designed by a number of people, like as in they had input from a number of people. But no, she was the one who said like, have something cover my ass, please.
Yeah, I think this is probably the definitive version of something for the dads in terms of a companion's outfit.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. Yeah. So at the beginning of part 1, the Doctor whistles an extended version of the Colonel Bogey March, which people may recognise from the bridge on the River Kwai, or the playground song Hitler's Only Got One Ball, depending on where you heard it first. Bob Holmes had originally suggested that Leela possessed some sort of like supernatural powers, which he invented this whole idea of like a witch priestess grandmother, which is why they all call her a witch. Because everyone calls her a witch, and whenever we got an explanation as to why. But Chris, the writer, decided that that wasn't really a thing, so instead he sort of gave it sort of like a sixth sense for danger. So it was sort of a heightened awareness when it came to danger. I kind of agree with him. I'm not really a big fan of the supernatural powers idea, though it would explain why they keep calling her a witch.
Yeah, the thing is, like, we've seen before how, like, the show has stood time and time again on just regular, I suppose you could say, people, or just regular companions, like, without a fucking gimmick, you know? So I wouldn't necessarily see the benefit of the character having those powers.
Yeah, me either. So one of the more interesting moments in this story, I think, for people, is when the Doctor threatens the 17 tribesmen who originally come across him, and he whips out a jelly baby, and he's like, stand back or I'll kill this man with this deadly jelly baby. That was Tom's idea. Originally, the Doctor was meant to threaten him with a knife, and Tom basically said no, he thought it was too violent and out of character, so it was changed to a jelly baby instead. Thomas was originally named Loke, or Loke, and he had a more prominent role before we decided to give Leela more focus, which she did have considerable focus in the story.
Yeah, actually, speaking of it, doing this edit was really kind of difficult for me, or like they're doing the readings, they're difficult because my brother, his name is Tomas, which is spelled very similar to Thomas, just without the fada. So I had to keep stopping myself from saying Tomas.
Yeah, and also like I think in the original list you gave me, you called him Thomas, as in TH.
Oh, right. that was probably an autocorrect.
Yeah. But let's talk about our cast. So as Caleb, we have Leslie Schofield. This is the second and final appearance for Leslie. We previously saw him as Leroy in the War Games, so who's one of the soldiers in the barn.
Yeah, he was the kind of with the example we gave of like the Southern hospitality type thing,
Yeah. Thomas is played by Brendan Price. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. His non-Who credits include Softly Softly Task Force, Space 1999, The Sweeney, Robin of Sherwood, Emmerdale, and Borgia. Neva is played by David Garfield. This is the second and final appearance for David. We also saw him in the War Games, where he played Von Wyk, or Von Wyk. Can't remember how we pronounce that time.
Yeah.
The guy with the monocle.
Yes.
Andor is played by Victor Lucas. This is the only Doctor Who acting credit for Victor. His non-Who credits include The New Statesman, World's End, Gary Halliday, and The Flying Swan. Victor passed away in 2000. As Jabel, we have Leon Eagles. This is the only Doctor Who acting credit for Leon. His non-Who credits include The Tomorrow People, Julius Caesar, The Black Tulip, The Jensen Code, Z-Cars, and one of my favourite Barry Letts creations, Gulliver and the Lilliput. Leon passed away in 1997. The voices of Zoannan were provided by Tom Baker, obviously, and then Rob Edwards, Pamela Salem, Roy Herrick, and the young child voice was provided by Anthony Fries, who was 11. Lastly, we have Leela, our new companion, who is played by Louise Jameson. So Louise was born in April of 1951. She attended the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, RADA, along with the woman who will later succeed her as companion, Mary Tam. She spent 2 years in the Royal Shakespeare Company, performing in Romeo and Juliet, The Taming of the Shrew, King Lear, and Blithe Spirit. She'll go on to appear in 9 televised stories, as well as the mini-episode Dimensions in Time. Paddy and I talked about this a little bit off air. Unfortunately, Louise's introduction to the show wasn't great. Tom Baker was particularly frosty towards her and not very welcoming, because he had kind of hoped that he could not have a companion. He'd hoped that they'd allow the Doctor to travel alone, and so he also wasn't really fond of having someone new come in after Liz Sladen had just left. And he was also quite critical of the savage Leela's flesh-bearing attire and the fact that she's wielding a dagger all the time. He didn't think that really worked with the Doctor, who we know the Doctor as. So that's unfortunate, that she didn't really have the big welcome. And she actually said in a documentary I watched, I can't remember what documentary it was. It was one of the ones, it might have been one of the ones on The Hand of Fear, where, shortly after she left, and obviously Louise is nice, this Sladen called up Louise Jameson and was like, or they bumped into each other, so I was like, oh, how are you getting on with Tom? And isn't it great? And isn't everyone great? Liz was clearly be like, oh yeah, it's fantastic, and Tom's lovely, and Louise was kind of like, I am not having that experience. Which Liz found quite shocking, apparently. So that's unfortunate.
But the one thing that I think is absolutely amazing, right, is that none of that from either side bleeds into their performance together on screen.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if it'll bleed into future stories. But none of it is seen in this story. And I will say that, obviously, I've watched all the behind the scenes stuff and the Blu-ray sets or whatever. Now the two of them get along very well.
I think because based on the book that I'm reading at the moment, Tom Baker kind of did a bit of a career retrospective, realized that he was being a bit of an asshole, and has gone did this huge apology tour to the people that he wronged. I think with the exception of one person who we will get to at some point down the line. But I think it might bleed in a small bit because we've talked about it before that this kind of arc now with Leela's tenure is a sort of a Doctor Who version of My Fair Lady.
Mm. Yeah, which is what kind of like, and that was kind of Philip's idea, to have Leela be the sort of Eliza Doolittle character to the Doctor's Henry Higgins. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops, and I hope it doesn't come through on screen, that sort of behind the scenes tension, but we'll have to wait and see. Louise has done a large number of audio stories, and she also appeared as Patricia Haggard in the 4 direct-to-video adventures of the investigating organisation Probe, with Caroline John as Liz Shaw, and in further works that were made based around Probe, which weren't like official releases. Those 2 characters get together. I don't remember me mentioning that when we were talking about Liz Shaw, that like she ended up like marrying some woman named Patsy. Yeah, that's Patricia Haggard, who was played by Louise Jameson. I don't think the two. Cool. I think that came out in like a home video kind of story after Liz died, or after Caroline died. So we never saw the 2 of them on screen together in that sort of relationship, but the 2 of them are on screen together in Probe.
That's cool.
Yeah, Louise's other credits include Emmerdale, Space 1999, The Omega Factor, EastEnders, and Blake 7.
So, thank you very much for all that wonderful trivia, and also our musical renditions of both Match of the Day and the Sunday game.
You can tell how much Trish likes sports, and the fact that I didn't know those 2 things were different things.
So, as always, now we're going to come on to the character discussion part of the podcast, where we discuss the Doctor, the companions, the villains, and any prominent characters that straddle the line between the 2 groups. So this week we have the Doctor, we have the companion of Leela, then I put on the prominent character of Thomas, and then I have Caleb and or Jabel, Neva, and Zohanan as villains.
I didn't originally put Caleb and Andor as villains. Only because, like, they're not, like, in comparison to Neva, they're not, like, particularly Caleb. I think Caleb wasn't a villain. He was someone who used things to his advantage. Andor was a leader, not a villain. Jabel, yeah, I agree. Jabel moved in. But the other 2, I kind of had them in prominent characters, but they'd be prominent characters more so towards the villains.
I think Andor would maybe prominent character because I think he's more of a patsy than he is anything else. But Caleb, I would put him firmly in the villain camp.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we can do is we can do what we always do, which is Dr. Leela. We can start off then with Thomas, and then we can use Caleb as our segue from prominent into villain territory. So you started off our wonderful episode, so you get to start off with the characters.
Cool. So the Doctor in the story, I like him for the most part. I do have one criticism, which is, like, I know that the Doctor doesn't like violence and killing as a general rule, but please stop judging other people's societal norms and placing limitations on someone whose people want to kill her. If it's like, no more Janice Thorns, never again use a Janice Thorn. Like, I get it, a Janice Thorn is a horrible way to die, but like, these people are trying to kill her, and in her society, this is a perfectly defensible weapon. You know? And like later, he knocks someone into a wall and electrocutes them to death. And he says, like, oh, he wishes he didn't have to do that, and like, she's acting on instinct, and you're criticizing her for it.
Yeah, this is the thing, is that, like, Leela is a hunter / warrior. Like, this, like, it's, you can't expect someone to immediately fight against their nature just because you're on the scene,
Yeah, and also, like, he makes that, he says it to her as a directive. They do not know each other well enough for him to be giving her directives on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, it would be something if it was like, 2 or 3 stories in, and she was attacking people on a random planet with a Janus thorn. Do you know, like, it was literally like, she's on freaking, Earth in 2257 and she's attacking random people with a Janus thorn. Do you mean like that would be different because she's using a weapon people can't recognize or defend themselves against people in an environment that they're not used to. The fact that the Janus thorn gets used on her later on just shows that this isn't just Leela being a bitch. This is a weapon that these people use, and it's part of their natural way of doing things. So personally, I just took a bit of an issue with that, which is the way he says it, and the fact that it's like this directive from on high after he's trying to convince her that he's not a god. It's like, if we're not a god, stop telling me what to do.
But I think like it's the natural hypocrisy of the Doctor, like across all 4 iterations that we've seen. It's like where he condemns violent actions and condemns people that do violent actions, meanwhile not really acknowledging the evil actions that he or violent actions he himself takes.
Like in this same story, he flicks what is essentially a land piranha at somebody for no fucking reason whatsoever.
Well, the guy slapped Leela in the face, like, so he was like going. It was. I think that was a complete overcorrection by the Doctor's part.
Yeah, but like,
slap him back.
Yeah. Also, she can fucking defend herself. Do you know, like, again, it's the hypocrisy that I don't believe. Like, overall, though, I actually quite liked him in the story. I didn't like his 4th wall break. We'll talk about that later on. I do quite like his interactions with Leela, other than that one piece. That one piece bothered me, but everything else, they were fun and not as condescending as I was afraid they would be, because I kind of knew going in. Again, I have like some sort of general cultural awareness of Leela as a character, so I kind of knew going in they were going for the Eliza Doolittle Henry Higgins thing, and I was afraid that he would be like super condescending to her. But he isn't. He's actually he takes his time with her. Like, he doesn't snap at her or anything. He tries to explain. And then, like, when she has a sort of, savage reaction, or like where she reacts to something as if it's magic or as if it's a god or whatever, he's like, is that what you really think? Like, he's not judging her for it. He's just leading her down to the next step.
Yeah.
Based off of decisions that she already made herself earlier in the story. So.
And like, it's as well, like, he's not withholding on the praise for her as well, like, because do you remember when he's like, I need to figure out a way to get past that bar, and she's like, well, if nothing can get through it, how can we hear this radio signal? And he just kind of goes to Leela, you're a genius. And it's like, he doesn't bandy that word around lightly, like, as we've seen in the past.
I quite like that, because I was afraid it would be very condescending. I'd actually hate it.
Like, you were afraid like of a second Doctor moment,
Yeah, or even a 3rd Doctor moment in a way. He could be very condescending.
Oh yeah, hugely.
So yeah, but either way, I was happy overall with it. How about you?
So I just, like, how big does your ego have to be that you have to fight yourself as the villain? But there's like I just fucking laugh at it, But like, seriously, like, I like you, I enjoyed the Doctor a lot in this story. The comedic timing, like, as I said, like, his little kind of moments of the tennis match between Caleb and Neva. I did like the slapstick 4th wall break, because it was a very Marx Brothers type thing, so I kind of enjoyed that. But his interactions with everyone, and like the Henry Higgins, Eliza Doolittle, or reverse Jane and Tarzan type fucking relationship that they have going. But the one thing that I thought was kind of cool was that it's all like, we don't get to see it enough, I don't think, is that the consequences of him failing to ensure that what he is doing is the right thing. So like kind of like a reverse Genesis moment. So like, he like absolutely thought through the whole idea of eliminating the Daleks from existence. Whereas here in his like he's now coming to face the consequences of his action, which is like that. I didn't check everything enough thoroughly.
Mm.
No, that's potentially excused by the novelization explanation. You know, it's like, oh, he went to the planet when he had just regenerated, and of course, like there's the fog that we see with a lot of Time Lords. But I love the callback to that, and I actually like to see him take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like that. Like, when he finally figures out what happened,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, this is my fault. There's no sort of, I didn't know, or how could I have known, or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
He very much is like, no shit, this was me.
Yeah, and
This is all on me.
he takes the blame for it the entire way through. All like once the revelation is made. So like what we're episode 3 or sorry started end of episode 2, start of episode 3. So yeah, for over half the story, like he never once tries to shirk the blame.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah. So moving on.
Yes, we have Leela.
Leela. This is probably going to sound odd, right? But for a character that is visually designed to be like a sort of a sex appeal for the show, her sex appeal is probably like the least distinguishing, or at least the last distinguishing feature of the character for me as I'm watching this particular story, because her resourcefulness, her intelligence, her skills, and her insights they all take center stage for me, and like then the outfit / sex appeal is like an afterthought.
I sort of compare her a little bit to like Xena.
Yeah.
In a sense, I imagine like guys at the time are like, oh yeah, something for the dads. And then you sort of realize she could kick my ass 5 ways to Sunday.
Or like
that's for some people that's quite intimidating.
Or even like, if we want to go with someone that we both, have known and loved for a long time, Princess Leia.
Oh yeah.
Like Leia was like, always, maybe not in so much in Empire, but definitely like in New Hope and at the start of Return of the Jedi, she's there as kind of like the eye candy of the story. But as you watch the actual movies, you're like, I'm not really paying attention to that. I'm paying attention to what she's doing. I'm paying attention to the actions she's taking and the dialogue she's delivering. That's the same here.
I think some people would disagree with us on the beginning of Return of the Jedi, but you and I both have very similar feelings on that particular outfit.
Yeah. And it's like, here's the thing where it's a character like that's meant to be like, or like even, 7 of 9. 7 of 9 was designed to be, and it's like, well, no, kind of fairly early off the bat for me anyway. It's like, oh no, 7 is actually a fucking cool character, and that the part that's marketed ends up being the afterthought for me anyway. And I really enjoyed that here. So like for an introductionary story for a character, this is, I would say, probably on par with Time Warrior for Sarah Jane.
Oh, I would agree. Like as an introductory story for a character, I think she probably couldn't have gotten a better one.
Yeah.
I'll say I really like her. I was afraid just because I hadn't seen a lot of Leela's stuff. I'd seen clips, but that was about it. I was afraid that she would be very quote unquote savage.
Yeah.
That she'd be afraid of everything, or she'd react to everything as if it was magic. But she doesn't. She clearly, like, the story starts off because she's on trial for speaking out against an attack that she's convinced won't fucking work. And she's convinced Zoannin is a fucking hoax. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's like, this is ridiculous. So, like, before we even fully get to know her, we see that she's not gullible. She's not someone who buys into things when her experiences challenge that. The doctor said, like you mentioned earlier, that, like, people in power and the very stupid have one thing in common. They change facts to fit their perspective. Whereas Leela changes her perspective to fit the facts as they are presented to her.
Yeah.
And she does that very well in a way that's very believable. I know some people sort of probably thought that, like, her acceptance that he wasn't the evil one was very quick. But when the evil god, or like the devil or whoever, saves your life and you find out that these babies of jelly that he kills people with are sweets, you're kind of like, okay. I was sus on this stuff before. I'm fucking super sus now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you're already like kind of like questioning the doctrine, like, like, you're not going to immediately fall back to being 100%.
She has the initial reaction of, oh, holy fuck, your man looks like the fucking thing, but like she's not restricted by it. I think in terms of, like I said, in terms of an introduction, I think it's fabulous. We get to know a lot about her as a person, what her sort of morals are and stuff like that, in a similar way to what we saw with Sarah Jane, like you said, in Time War, which is fantastic. And I actually love the ending for her. I love that, like, when the doctor wakes up, she's just been sitting over him eating chocolate.
Yeah. And his chocolate at that, like.
Yeah. I was like, you've been unconscious for 2 days. I've just been sat here keeping an eye on you. And like, she left him on the floor. Which, like, yeah. He'll wake up eventually. I just go sit here and keep an eye. He'll be fine. Oh, look. Does he have more sweets in his pocket? He does.
But there's also, like, just some, like, the bit at the very end where Zoanna manifests like a couch for them all to sit on, and like the doctor sits down with his cigarette case of jelly babies, but Leela sits down like in like the cross-legged pose, like at the far end of the couch. In the sense like it's always great, and I've said it before. It's like when a new companion comes in, and even like their first performance, like it's instantly a contender for like best performance of their run for the show on the Rambling. Like this is straight away as definitely into the top 3 performances. We haven't seen anything else.
We haven't seen anything else of hers, but I do love her ending though, because I love her absolute terror at being elected the leader, because she's like, I do not want to be surrounded by these idiots. Never mind, lead them. Doctor, please take me with you.
Because she's like, I'm completely was irrational or something that she said, like basically just trying to fob off, like it's actually the one time like her femininity comes into the thing. It's like I can't be trusted with this.
Yeah, because she's just like, you're all fucking stupid. Like you're all mental. This is insane. I'd rather just leave you to try and solve this yourselves. Like, I don't want to be involved. Like, as soon as she understood that they were like divergent from the same crew, and that they've both reacted in extreme ways, she's like, well, both of those extremes are fucking thick stupid. I don't want to have anything to do with them. No, which I just thought was brilliant. It's a fantastic companion introduction of just like, why should I take you with me? Well, you like me, don't you? That's all she wanted.
Yeah.
We had a good time. We had a nice adventure. Can I come with you, please? Thanks.
And like, there's like this like hodgepodge of like different introductory elements, like in the sense of she's kind of built like the female Jamie, in the sense of the savage companion or archetype, and then like I suppose like, there's the dodo aspect of where she just runs straight into the TARDIS and is immediately fucking pushing buttons and touching shit, but like as you said, like doesn't have the negative traits of those characters, in the sense of like, whereas Jamie was like, oh look, it's a big yon metal beastie, and it's like she's like, no, there's none of that type of thing, and it's more from the idle curiosity rather than it's I want to learn, as opposed to like just randomly pushing shit. Really good, solid performance, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. Shall we move on to our prominent characters, though?
Yes, we should. So Thomas, one way we can both definitely agree is a prominent character.
Yes. My overall feeling is Thomas is a nice guy. He's clearly someone who has the best of the tribe at heart.
Yes.
And like he believes Leela. Like he was obviously in Leela's camp when she was originally being kicked out and stuff. I don't know if they were originally going to go for like a romantic relationship between the two, and then they dropped it. I kind of got that kind of sense at the start. But like, he is like whatever's best for the tribe, and he's just an overall nice guy. Like he participated in the attack because everyone was participating, and if he didn't, and that's why the attack failed, he would have felt like shit, which is why he called Caleb out on it. It was like, if we'd had one more person, maybe we could have gotten through. Like the idea that like his not participating, like, what if he was wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And his not participating is why they failed.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand that. He's like, well, if they're all going in, I'll die with my brothers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go in with them. And I think like that makes him a really good character. Like he trusts Leela, which I think is great. He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
question her about the doctor or anything. She's like, well, Leela trusts you, so I trust you too, which is fantastic. How about you?
Yeah, no, I pretty much in agreement there. Like, I like that they didn't have him be like overtly in love with Leela or continually falling over, and instead he just like it's a show of respect of her skills and her determination. Like at the very start, when she's banished, and he's like, but the creatures that are out there, and she's like, look, whatever's out there, I can handle it. He doesn't. Again, never once is the fact that she's a female is brought up.
Mm.
Like he respects her as an equal, equal warrior, equal hunter, and that's continually on display. Like he values their friendship or whatever it is, but and in his heart he believes that Leela is best for the tribe, and like, he, as you said, like he's what I want, what's best for the tribe.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think a well written character and a good performance as well by your man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like
Yeah.
Thomas would be put into the character grouping of all round good egg.
Yes. So with Caleb, how do you want to do it? Like, so do you still have him as a prominent character? Yeah.
Yeah, but he's like the closest to being villain in the prominent character list.
Okay.
I would have
So
Andor as less of a villain than Caleb.
So all right, okay, yeah, yeah, okay, we'll do Andor as a prominent character because yeah, as you say, like, he's the least villainous of everyone else.
But yeah, Andor is a weird leader.
Mm-hmm.
I say that because he doesn't seem to believe in Neva's rhetoric. Like he fully is cognizant that the Neva at least could be spouting total bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But he makes the choice to follow that bullshit. And maybe you could say that he's following it for the betterment of the tribe. Like the tribe believes in it, and so we're going to follow it. And like he does say to Neva later on, we're going to attack on your say so, but if this fails, we'll know you're a charlatan. We'll know that you're making this up.
Mm.
But like on the one hand, he comes across as quite strong. He wants what's best for his people, but it's like you clearly don't believe Neva though, or at least not 100%. So why go forward with it? Or why not demand more evidence? Why not, go into Neva's private room and try and have a audience with Zoan and yourself or something? I just think he's a bit of a weird hodgepodge of very calm and willing to listen, because like he does listen to Thomas, like in whatever, but at the same time commits to Neva's rhetoric. Like,
yeah, it's
weird
so like he's like as Caleb said, he's a puppet king, and it's weird, like, because he comes across at times like he's completely under Neva's thumb.
Yeah.
And then when he tries to like act in defiance of being under that person's thumb, but still acknowledging that he's under that thumb, it kind of comes across as a bit foolish, It's like if you're like if this is your belief, how did you end up in this position in the first place?
Yeah.
And if it's like a belief that you developed like after, like, so, like, just say like you completely trusted Neva, but then you started to kind of gauge like maybe not so sure, why haven't you voiced it to like other senior council members?
Yeah.
It's, I think there's like an element of face showing going on here that is it's not working out best for him,
Yeah, it's kind of like he's trying to go with the popular vote.
Mm-hmm.
At the at the moment, more people believe Neva than don't.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go with it.
Yeah.
But there's enough people that don't believe him. But there's enough people that don't believe him that I need to cover my ass.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, he's never going to win that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was my overall. Like the reason why I had him down as like a prominent character rather than a villain is that like you know, like he's a puppet. Like he doesn't actually
Yeah, I think
have
it's
an
like that.
opinion of his own.
Yeah, like there's no action taken off his own whim. It's under like the influence or what he thinks is the right course of action as dictated by someone else.
Yeah, or as dictated by the doctrine. You know, it's not.
Yeah.
There's no targeted malicious intent.
No.
You know, it's this is what our law demands, and this is what we'll do.
Yeah.
Then we have Caleb, who you did put in the villain category. I didn't. I don't know why.
So you go on with your thing, or your rationale for him, and then I'll go with my thoughts on him.
My thing with Caleb is, yes, he is more than a bit of a dick. It's hard to tell whose side he's on, other than his own. You know, he abandoned the assault. He attacked Leela. He put the doctor to the what's it called
the Horda,
the Horda or whatever. So, in that sense, yes, villainous character. But in the other sense, like there's nothing personal about that. Do you know? I think yeah, he's a villain, but he's a villain in the sense of it could have been anybody. He wanted to be in control of the tribe. The doctor was the way to do that. You know, it's nothing personal. You know what I mean? It was just you have now given me a way to get power. And the more I say it, the more he sounds like an outright villain. But I don't know why for some reason I put him as prominent characters, because in comparison to Neva, I think he is the lesser evil of the two. I think because he's more of your sort of bog standard, I want power kind of guy.
I think like the one kind of major factor to this is that like he's willing to sacrifice the lives of the other members of the tribe just like, so his whole thing was like, if the attack fails, then like Neva has lost his power. It's like, well, how does the attack fail? Oh, well, we fucking lose, and whoever dies, it's just further evidence that Neva's wrong. It's like, cool. So you're willing to fucking step over the bodies of your fellow tribespeople in an attempt to gain power, not people that are opposing you, mind you. Like it's not like it's a fucking civil war, but it's like you're willing to sacrifice all these fucking people in the possibility that you will gain power. So like, you're coming across like the consummate politician, which is like, I'll sacrifice anyone and anything to come out on top. So like, like even if you hadn't been, if you take the doctor out of the equation, the attack was always going to happen. That was the thing. The raid was always going to happen, and Caleb's quest for power is always going to thing. So if you take the doctor out of the equation, Caleb is still willing to sacrifice members of the tribe, so he can take over control of stuff.
No, mate, that makes sense. Yeah, no, think about it that way. I think I was more looking at it from a sense of he didn't want to commit himself to a plan he didn't think would work anyway, because he thought Neva was speaking bollocks.
Oh,
so why should I die for bollocks? The difference being that Caleb or Thomas didn't want to take that risk, whereas Caleb was not only more than happy to take the risk, he tried to encourage other people to take that risk with him, because he tried to get Thomas to not participate. He's like, no, none of us will go. It'll just be the people who believe that go. And Thomas was like, but they'll die if we don't go, or they could die if we don't go. And Caleb says like, well, they could die if we do. So, yeah, I think it's more the fact that he went and then turned around and left.
Yeah, and then it's like that fucking kind of what is it? Start of the Hobbit. Fuck it, like the please help us elves, and the elves march up and then they just fucking turn right back around. That type of fucking thing. But yeah, no, just like he reminds, I don't think you've ever seen it, but he reminds me of a character from the movie 300, which is basically he wants to become this council member, just wants to take control of stuff, and he's willing to sacrifice Leonidas and the 300. Granted, he's being fucking paid off to do it, but he's willing to sacrifice that and everyone else to become, king. And Caleb, for me, just falls right into that camp, and I'm like, nah, fuck it. If you're willing to sacrifice, like you're saying like that you don't believe in all this bullshit, and we shouldn't believe in all this bullshit. Fair enough. How about the people that do believe in it? Rather than try to swing them around to our way of thinking, we'll just let them fucking kill themselves so that I can come out on top.
Yeah, no, good point.
So that's my thoughts on Caleb.
So then we have the rest of our villains. So
Mhm.
Neva, Jabel, and Zoannon. Who do you want to do first?
So Neva and Jabel are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
One reason I like this story is that there's an awful lot of, um, whether it be intentional or not, kind of analogies to like separation of church and state and the combination of the two and the various types of kingdoms that can happen, like which is like say like a theocracy, where it's like the head of the church and the fucking leader of the tribe is essentially one and the same person, and making the rules for both. Um, maybe do Jabel first because he's the least screen time of the trio.
Yeah, I think he's also the most easily explained. He's a dickhead that needs to get laid.
Yeah, uh, I think that's
Given the fact that the Tesh are meant to be like they have psionic powers,
mhm,
they he can control like he forced Leela to basically stop breathing or fall asleep or whatever.
mhm,
Um which means he can get into your mind.
mhm,
He welcomes the Doctor as the Time Lord returned,
mhm,
time for freedom, blah blah blah. But even with all of his advanced learning, even with all of his focus on the mind and like, bettering your mind, also as soon as he's like, "Oh, so you're not come to save us? Kill him!"
mhm.
I was like, "Okay."
This I just realized this kind of reminds me, elements of it remind me of the Savages. The
Yeah,
two societies on the one fucking planet, one deeming the other as inferior or fucking livestocky
yeah,
type thing.
yeah. It's very
Um,
similar. Like, but the thing with Jabel is that like Jabel sort of like he criticizes other people for showing emotion
mhm,
and fear. He's like, "No, be analytical and whatever." It's like, but he doesn't take the evidence in front of his own face.
mhm,
I was like, "So you're just a dickhead." So
yeah,
that's it. So you're just a dickhead.
yeah. And like he's also an example of, like, as I said, like where the head of both institutions is the one person,
Mm.
and like without anyone to check his power, you like sometimes you see like in some science fictions like that's a very altruistic person.
Mm.
Whereas in other times it's like no, like there's an element of fucking dark side and an element of like totalitarianism to the whole thing.
Yeah, and like
And
even like after the Doctor tells him to stop attacking Leela, he's like, "Oh, we'll
mhm,
take her somewhere to take care of her." And the Doctor's like, "Great!" Like like he jumps to this massive conclusion that the Doctor brought her there as an experiment. I was like,
mm.
did that did that look like an experiment to you?
Because and that's even with his own people, even with the other Tesh, like everyone is beneath him,
Mm.
and like the way he speaks to him, even the way he holds himself, like everyone is fucking beneath him.
Yeah,
Yeah, so just as you say, go dip your wick somewhere.
yeah.
Then there's Neva.
I find Neva to be a weird mix of a character.
Okay.
So Neva of the second half of the story
Mm-hmm.
is like Neva after the failed attack is
Mm-hmm.
quite different from the Neva that we saw at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because his belief system is shaken
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And he goes into this fucking stupor, and then he's like, "No, I'm going to kill Zoannon because Zoannon lied to me." But at the beginning, he's fucking a weird mix because he clearly knows that half of what he's spouting is total fucking bullshit. Like the whole fake like possession with the fucking blue thing with the handles. That he
Yeah.
was just the one shaking like, "Oh, there's bad energy vibes here, oh
Mm-hmm.
whatever." And I was like, he clearly knew he was speaking total bollocks.
Mm-hmm.
Total bollocks. And yet part of him does believe in it. Like he does speak to Zoannon. So he does believe in it to some extent. But he's
Yeah.
also making up loads of shit. And it's like, well, do you believe it's all true, or are you making shit up? Why are you doing both?
So I think it's see. All right. So this is the thing. Okay, is that he knows Zoannon is a real thing.
Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, Zoannon's instruction to him, I suppose, is like, hey, let's just keep this between you and I. But he has nothing to show the power of Zoannon. So he does have to put on a bit of a fucking song and dance, you know?
Yeah, but like, bring the leader into your fucking room, so. Let him hear the voice of Zoannon. Do you know what I mean? It just seems like, and maybe part of it isn't his fault. Zoannon is a schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's getting two sets of fucking information. Of, here's what I'm going to tell you, here's the litany, here's the whatever. I want you to play it up, though. I want you to be over the top. I want you to be... Like, maybe Zoannon was giving him two different fucking sets of instructions. And this is the only way he could figure it out. But yeah, his costume is so funny. Like his like bastardized suit,
space suit, and then like the fucking hat with a glove attached to the top of it.
Yeah, you're like, oh dear.
Potentially controversial thing to bring up, right? But one thing that kind of I was thinking the entire way throughout this for Neva, right? I was like, what's more dangerous than a religious leader who holds sway over the court? A religious leader who is actually as a god that communes back. You know? And now, it's a controversial statement because, you know, for religious purposes, priests or imams or monks or whatever, they are meant to be the vessels of God or Muhammad or whatever deity or whomever. And it's like, you kind of sometimes wonder the authority with which people speak. It's like what's behind that authority? What's the confidence behind that authority? And like here, I suppose, like with the beauty of, like, I suppose, like with science fiction is that we can kind of write that element into it. But like here, like you can imagine what things would have been like, and we've seen it before in other genres of sci-fi, you know, other shows of sci-fi, like what it's like when people are just fucking making it up. But it's so much worse when the actual fucking when the voice at the other end of the speaker answers back.
Yeah, like it sort of reminds me, like if somebody to describe it that way, it sort of reminds me a little bit of one of the least favorite episodes of TNG by a lot of people. I don't think it's the worst episode. It's not great. Justice from season 1, where you have this perfect planet, these perfect people, and they have this one rule. It's their only rule: do not enter the white cordoned off areas, and to do so means death, because that's what their god told them, and that's the will of their god. And you're sort of watching going, that's such weird nonsense, whatever. And then you find out that no, actually, no, there is a giant alien species that's taking care of them. And you're like, oh, holy shit. So again, it's kind of the thing of like, they have this weird rule given to them by God, and you're like, well, that's clearly like, you know, someone made up a law ages ago, and it's just total nonsense, or whatever. And then you find out, no, actually, there actually is someone keeping an eye on them that does intervene when someone tries to do something against them. Oh, holy shit.
Yeah. Or even if you go like to Deep Space Nine, like, you know, with fucking Win, you know? And her interpretation. And it's like, you know, like the thing is, like, they're there and they exist, but just because they're not contradicting the shit that you're saying doesn't mean that you can treat whatever you're saying as fucking factual, you know?
Yeah.
You can't fathom what they are.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Neva as well is the fact that he clearly enjoys his power. He's not just the humble priest. He clearly enjoys his power and he wants more of it. He wants Leela out because Leela's speaking out against him. And again, like for the first half of the story, that's very much his thing, is that he wants all of the credit for what's happening. When they successfully free Zoannon or whatever, he wants all of the credit. He wants all of the power. Then we flip that with him in the second half of the story, where for episode 3, he's pretty much a fucking zombie shell of himself, to the point where the doctor, using his same voice, asks him a question, and he gets yes, master, and the doctor stands like 5 feet away and covers his mouth and asks the exact same fucking question, and he answers him no problem. But part of me does kind of say good on you, Neva, that as soon as when he realizes it was all a giant pile of bullshit, he's like, fuck you, Zoannon, I'm going to kill Zoannon. And because he'd been controlled by Zoannon for so long, or he'd been communing with Zoannon, he's not affected by Zoannon. So he just walks in with his gun and just like, fuck you. And like part of me, like I kind of would have preferred to see him get his comeuppance with everybody else, and for him to have to admit what he had done and why he had done it, and sort of have to like him versus Jabel, and like both of them kind of having to come to terms with what they did and said in the name of Zoannon. So I kind of felt bad that he got like disintegrated. But not really.
Yeah. It's one of those moments. It's like, fucking Vaughn in The Invasion. It's like, it's great, when he finally fucking fights back, but for like the preceding one is like 7 episodes, like you're kind of a dickhead. And then there is Zoannon, formerly known as Zoanon, in the really early moments of this fucking story. And then it's like, no, are we all on the same page? Zoannon, cool.
Yeah. And in Paddy's notes as Zeonon. You spelled it X-A. Anon. Originally. When you
fair enough.
When you sent me over the list. Yep.
Whatever Elon Musk's kid, okay?
That's not fair to Elon Musk's actual children.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I apologize.
I think Zoannon is a really interesting concept. I love the idea of a computer that not only has a split personality, but also a god complex. It's so interesting. I kind of wanted to see more of it, though. I was really like, oh my god, what's this? When it was like you hear the little boy's voice saying, who am I? I was like, oh my god, is this like a progressive thing where there's constantly going to be new personalities coming out? And it sort of reminded me in a way of the SG1 episode Lifeboat. Remember where Daniel gets all of these like consciousnesses downloaded into his head, and it has one of Frasier's best lines ever, which is you do not belong in that man's body, and I intend to take it back. Best Frasier scene ever. But where you have all of these new personalities coming out, and one of them is a little boy. And part of me was like, like over the years, did Zoannon also absorb, like, because first they say it's a survey team, and then they say it was like a colony ship. Like, were there kids on this ship originally? And like after Zoannon took the Doctor's brain pattern and achieved sentience, did he inadvertently absorb other brain patterns as well that are only now expressing themselves? So like when the little boy's voice started, I was like, oh holy shit, is there actually going to be more personalities coming out? Is one of them going to be a sort of childlike personality? And is that where originally having the two groups came from, because the little child playing war or something?
Or like it was because like what I had thought was, because the Doctor said that he didn't recognize like a birth trauma of a. So I was like going, obviously there's like the Doctor element of Zoannon, and then there's just Zoannon as what it would have been before the crash. I was thinking that the little boy was going to be that birth trauma, that new entity that had been born.
That was like the core of the new personality.
And I was like, but then it just was like, no, it's just some fucking random voice.
It's the voices just freak you out. But so that was probably the only downside with Zoannon that I think was sort of underutilized. And I'm sure, like, had it been maybe a 5-parter, we may have seen more about the personalities, maybe. Because I think that would have been a really interesting concept to see, is, not only... Because then that puts the Doctor in an interesting position where not only does he have to remove his own memory pattern, but potentially having to remove others as well. And does that mean essentially killing, like you said, if the boy's voice was the new entity, is essentially killing him or whatever. So I think it could have been a bit more.
Or like the well, I don't know if you've seen it, but Voyager Tuvix,
Yeah,
when Neelix and
Tuvix,
Tuvok,
yeah.
it's like, are you killing this new person to get the two old people back?
Yeah, which
And
I
like,
kind of would have liked to have seen a bit more of that. But that's not to say that what we got was bad. It's just I think it had great potential to be more.
Huge. Like there's like, it's, as you say, like it's such an interesting idea to do. And like not even like like the multiple personalities and like the god complex, but to have one of the personalities be like a reflection of the Doctor.
Yeah.
I think that was a masterstroke. But like I think the question that's done at the end, and like it will come up in my thoughts overall. Like how Leela says that like, what you did was despicable. Like you pitted two groups against each other in a sort of like an experiment, like with all these various different eugenics overture or themes, and like how much is like Zoannan responsible for it? Like the remaining personality of Zoannan, like what's the culpability there? And like even now that he's fixed essentially, and like, they had that sit down to say like, well, like where did I first go wrong? That's fine for you, but is the damage done, or is it already done between the two factions now? That like they're at an impasse when the story ends.
Yeah,
and it's like if they're at this continual loggerheads, how long can you stay the course with this new mentality you have before you slip back to being like, before you either take control again or they revert back to you as being this godlike figure and you have no choice but to slip back into that side of things.
Yeah, because that's the one thing. Like, I don't get how, like, with Zoannan remaining on the planet, I don't get how the people left on the planet now that Leela has left don't just naturally slip into, well, Zoannan for a while was a god with a personality disorder, but he's still a god. Do you know? I don't get how they don't naturally fall back into that.
And like
it would almost have been better if like we find out that like, oh, there was actually an escape shuttle and it was fixed years ago, but the Tesh never knew what it was, so they never left, and like Zoannan leaves the planet and just leaves them fucking alone to develop on their own.
Like I agree. I don't think this necessarily was a 6-parter, but there's untapped and unfinished elements here that would have warranted for either a 5th episode or a restructuring of the story itself.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it ends in the novelization. If there's any sort of, if those last 2 scenes, well, bar the last 3 scenes, if they're written any differently, if there's any sort of, insight given, like internal monologue or whatever given, to sort of explain that a bit more. But there's always so much you can do in a story, and it's perfectly fine for us to come back 30 years later and be like, well, actually,
I like
this way.
And as well, like the fucking constraints that Hinchcliffe and fucking even like script editor like Robert Holmes were fucking under at this point in time as well. Like from the higher ups, it's like they had their vision for what the show could be, and I suppose as well when you've got kind of Tom Baker like fucking swinging his scarf around the place, it can be a bit difficult. But like it's just, I think it's having the seeds there is better than having nothing at all.
Yeah, I think this story could very easily have been like, if you take out the fact that the show was called Doctor Who. And you replace the Doctor with anybody else, this would have been a very interesting film. Because I think in film you can do different things.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very interesting premise for a film. And part of that I'll get into my overall. But Zoannan in particular is a very interesting premise for a film. Because also, we keep referring to Zoannon as a he because Zoannon isn't just a computer. And that in itself is a very interesting premise, I think.
Yeah.
Then again, I also refer to Alexa as a she, so.
Yeah.
And she's not sentient last time I checked.
Yet.
But last time I asked her, she said she wasn't, so.
Yeah. So we have reached the end of this particular road. So we will now give our thoughts of the story and give it a score of 5. So Trish, lead us on.
So I mentioned earlier this would make a really interesting film. There is a film that has a lot of elements of the story. It's just missing Zoannon. And that was Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes.
Oh, Jesus.
Which does have, like, you know.
Yeah, it fucking was it Kalima and Simos and that weird fucking ending that.
Yeah. Doesn't it ring a bell? Yeah, no.
Of all the Planet of the Apes movies to bring up on the podcast, you have to bring up the worst one.
Is it the worst one?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
This is okay. This is my belief that it is the worst one. It is the only one that I do not have a physical copy of. I don't have any copy of it whatsoever.
Like many things, when it comes to like science fiction and stuff, it was the first Planet of the Apes movie I ever saw.
Yeah.
Same as Terminator 3 was the first Terminator film I ever saw. Alien vs. Predator was the first Alien film I ever saw. Episode 1 was the first Star Wars film I ever saw, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But anyway, back to this. Like I said, overall, I think the premise of the story is really interesting. The computer with a split personality and a god complex. That is like an elevator pitch for a movie or for a story. You have me straight away. That's super interesting. Add in the sort of psionic abilities, and it's stacking up like all the interesting things about the story. I thought it was a really good introduction to Leela. Like we said, we get to see where she comes from and how she reacts to new experiences. And there's no time wasted with Leela. There's no filler with her.
No,
it's straight into the action, all go, and all good character building the whole way.
Yeah, she's a ready-made character on already done.
Yeah. What I will say is that the implementation of the story and some of the supporting performances were a bit lacking for me. So, the Horda was really odd, right? So, the Horda are basically land piranhas, you know? And at one point, there's a very sort of James Bond-esque thing of the floor coming apart and you're going to fall into a pit of land piranhas. And the whole thing is, are you going to face the Horda? And it's like, this is the ultimate test. This test is to tell if you are immortal or if you are being judged and all this kind of stuff. The test is snap a rope with a crossbow. Or with a bolt from a crossbow. And it's made to seem insane. It's meant to be this crazy thing. And there's two things that kind of hold it back, in my opinion. One, yeah, we see the Doctor fling the fucking Horda at that one guy who ran off screaming. But we only ever have their word for it that it strips the flesh off you. You know, we didn't actually see him tear it off and whatever. But two, Leela stresses the point of it gets thinner and faster. Which is clearly like that you are going to very quickly run out of time to do whatever it is you need to do. And then it's revealed that the thing that gets thinner and faster is the rope. Except the way they shot it, that rope didn't get any fucking thinner or any fucking faster. And the Doctor had fucking ages to acquire an aim and shoot. So it's like this big build-up that they failed to deliver on. Similarly, like, you know, I think the way Neva was done was a bit too comedic. And maybe there's no good way of doing the whole,
tribal shaman.
Tribal shaman without being super fucking offensive, or to do the whole religion based on a misunderstanding of modern or future technology or whatever. Maybe there's no good way of doing that. I just think they could have done the implementation better. And even something simple like the Tesh, their outfits are like these green and pink monstrosities.
I thought they were extras from Tron.
Yeah, or like from fucking the Emerald City or something.
Quickly, Leela, to the light cycles.
Or like something fucking Oz or something. Whereas I would have expected them to be more drab, more, just a jumpsuit, like a, basic, like clearly not of the land, like in the case of the 17, but like not these like bright green and pink monstrosities with sparkles on them.
Well, I think the sparkles were meant to be like LED lights. So if you kind of think about it, like the Tesh, who are the technicians, maybe like this is like a sort of first step on an eventuality of becoming like the Borg. Like becoming part machine, part human. In lines with we are the tech, we are look after the ship.
Maybe, but
possibly no. That was my read on it.
Yeah, I just saw them as sequins because Jabo likes his top being flashy. Or even like the whole idea with the Tesh and the fact that because Jabo says like, oh, we gave up the sins of the flesh and focused on expanding the mind. It's like, okay, well, all we know of the 17 is that they're warriors. We only see like 3 women, if even, and only one of them has a name. Do you know? And is in more than one scene. So like, where are these like sins of the flesh that the 17 gave into? Just so there's a few little bits there where like some things they said in the script that just
because
it's not what you're describing.
Did you kill off all the female Tesh?
Yeah, and also if you killed off all the female Tesh, where did new Tesh come from? And why do you do this weird sort of like Mexican wave when you're saluting? It's like so weird.
I don't know.
But yeah, so for me it was a case of the story idea was really good. The Doctor was good. Leela was good. Some of the supporting cast are good. Some of the supporting cast are meh. I think there was some bits of the implementation though that either cut it out, like either have the Horda just be a big giant animal and the Doctor grabs the crossbow to not cut the rope or something. So a couple bits. For me, I originally gave it a 3. I think I'm being cruel. I'm going to bump it up to a 3.5. I think I was being a bit harsh. How about you?
So, like yourself, I'm sold an awful lot in this story, like because I love the genre of like facts, like like in Lord of the Rings, facts become myths, myths become legends, or they're also like insane computer gods. I think it was like a fair chunk of the original series of Star Trek at one point, but like I really enjoy it. Tribal politics and the influence of religion over leaders, and like throw that into a science fiction element. I love it. Like I'm completely there for it. A really good showing from the Doctor, as we said. A fantastic performance from Louise Jameson in her debut, like as Leela. Because like one thing as well is that she's wearing really painful contacts at this point in time.
Yes, she is. So we didn't specify this in the trivia. So Louise Jameson's eyes are blue, but they wanted her eyes to be brown, and she's like probably because they made her skin quite brown. They kind of bronzed her up a fair bit, and so in order to get brown eyes when your eyes are blue, they have to give these like horrible red contact lenses. And apparently Philip Hinchcliffe was like, I didn't like that. I don't know who made that choice, but like Philip Hinchcliffe hated the fact that she had to do that. He doesn't know who made the choice, but he's like, no.
Yeah, and like so, like to be in that much pain with an actor, with a co-star that's like not particularly fucking fond of you, and then having to like do all these action sequences while like half the studio is trying to take a look where the sun doesn't shine, you know? Like, it's a fucking fantastic, and again, with the limited amount of cuts and edits that they could do with the budget at the time, great performance from her.
Yeah.
Where it loses marks for me is, no, normally I would complain about stuff not being wrapped up. Okay. However, sometimes I think that it's good to be reminded that when the Doctor leaves, life goes on.
Yeah.
And life isn't always going to be so, like, Caleb,
which was
not
kind of the whole
getting
point of this story in the first place.
yeah. So, like, Caleb not getting his fucking comeuppance for, like, all his bullshitting treachery. You know, the arguments over as to what's to happen going forward. Will Zoannon revert? Like, I liked that aspect of it. I liked that aspect anyway. However, the tone of the final sequences with Leah, the Doctor, and Zoannon, you know, like the comedic music playing over, like the where did I first go wrong? And it's like, and then, like, you know, the really stupid comedic music and the Doctor pulling a strange face. I'm like, okay, he's asking you how he turned into a genocidal maniac. This is not the time to do the fucking piano fanfare. Or, like, for the Doctor to look fucking sheepish. Also, Leela, who had just given out to Zoannon for being a genocidal maniac, laughs when, like, the Doctor was, like, kind of saying, like, oh, well, you know, it was my fault too, and, you know, nobody's perfect, and then they all share, like, this country club laugh, and I was like, that's very fucking odd.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. Also, the huge loss of potential with, like, why does Zoannon speak in different voices if it doesn't have distinct different personalities? Like, it speaks as the Doctor, it speaks as a regular human, or sorry, as a middle-aged human, an old man, middle-aged man, an old man, a middle-aged woman, and then we saw the young boy or the young child. And it's like, none of that is explored, none of that is explained. It's like, surely you would have distinct personalities to go along with these things. Or if you were going for the whole homogenous, like, it speaks with the voices of many, I think, well, then have all the voices speak at the exact same time and saying the exact same thing, as opposed to being conflicting, you know, like the whole, like, you know, our name is Legion, for we are many. You know, it's like, that's what they were seemed to be trying to do, you know, without having distinct personalities. But overall, I was actually really impressed with what the story was trying to delve into and the topics that it was trying to go with. So I give it a 4 out of 5.
Very good. So similar to our last story, Deadly Assassin, that you gave a 4 and I gave 3.5.
Mm-hmm. It's the bitterness of Sarah Jane. No, it's not. No. But no, again, like, I think it's just, like, lately, like, we've been seeing a lot of pushback to female-led fucking movies, action adventures, or even franchises. And, you know, a counter argument, like, I know they say, like, oh, but, like, you know, we liked all these women way back when. And, like, a counter argument to that is, like, you're like, oh, you know, when they're just fucking, like, eye candy or bits on the side and all this type of shit. And it's like, when the character is well written and well performed and given a good representation, it's like, I like seeing that. And the fact that we have Louise Jameson here, who's brought in as a character meant to be kind of like a sex appeal type thing, but it's the least distinguishing thing about her. I really, really do appreciate that in this story.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we compare it back, so we're now into our 4th sort of Doctor Who girl.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't think anyone would class Polly or Barbara or Vicky or Dodo or anything. I don't think I would class them as Doctor Who girls as such. That in that definition clearly came out of John Pertwee's era as a sort of comparison to the Bond girl.
I would say maybe Polly, because, you know, the whole, like, swinging 60s type vibe, but definitely from John's era onwards.
Yeah, so maybe Polly. I think the reason I don't do Polly is because Polly's usually paired up with Ben. So, maybe.
Yeah.
But this is the 4th standalone female companion in that sort of run. And for me, I think the outlier in terms of a really strong introduction to a character is Jo. Joe, like compared to the other three, Joe was kind of shafted.
Supremely shafted.
Do you know? And we kind of talked like, was Joe kind of, she was meant to not be as intelligent as Liz Shaw, and like Liz Shaw had her something for the dad's moments as well. Those boots and that skirt.
Yep, absolutely.
Joe, like, was Joe a kind of something for the dads? We talked about how like she was very much, from some people's perspective, meant to be like the Perils of Pauline kind of thing a lot of the ways. But it's interesting that if you were to put these women in a lineup, the one that you would definitely say, okay, well, that's the fucking something for the dads, just the eye candy, isn't going to have a whole lot of depth, is actually very competent, very capable, very intelligent, and has a whole lot of depth and great characterization in her first outing. So I think part of it is, and part of it doesn't kind of want to, like, I don't know if there's another companion comes up that kind of falls into that mold, but I kind of don't want to use the something for the dads comparison anymore. And I kind of feel bad that we've been using, because we were never said that we think someone was something for the dads. We said like historically they were seen as, but I actually don't like that anymore, because I think it's possibly limiting our view of the character based off of what people thought the character was going to be.
There's one other character that's going to come up that I think would probably fit or would be thrown into that mold, and that's Perry, Nicola Bryant, because of some of the costumes that or the outfit choices that she's given, and it's like doesn't really seem particularly necessary, nor does it seem to gel up with the character, But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, no, it's like like we got it from Darragh O'Brien. Yeah. And and he does, like, he makes the whole joke of like that. These things are put into shows because of the belief that men won't, and he actually says this, men won't pay attention unless they see something that keeps them relatively horny for the duration of it. And it's like, and he's taking the piss out of it. Like, he goes, I'm not an ape. I don't need to see this type of shit. And he's right. Unfortunately, it's just like, it's the terminology that we use to fucking describe characters that are brought in with that mindset.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, I think, in terms of getting back into this after 7 weeks, I sort of joked with Paddy that I wrote the initial trivia notes for this 6 weeks ago when I was in Berlin. And I only watched the episode 2 days ago. Life really did very much get away from me. But we are back now.
Yes.
I don't foresee any reason why we can't record next week. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And next week we have The Robots of Death. Ooh. So that'll be our second last story of this season. Just to give, I know some people are interested in the rankings so far for this season. Paddy, you're on a 4.13 average, and I'm on a 3.81. I've had 3 stories so far this season that I've ranked lower than you. So Mask of Mandragora, you had 3.5, I had 3.25. Hand of Fear, we both had 5.0. And then Deadly Assassin and Face of Evil, you gave 4, and I gave both of those at 3.5. So it's not too much of a difference, but some small differences there in how we rated them.
I think the big one that's going to be a really difficult one to score is probably the season finale, due to the reputation that it has. And
yeah, like I have never seen a single clip from the story, but I'm familiar with it just from the name. Yeah.
So, like, I'll be very interested to see your viewpoints on it, because this is, I think, one of those stories that we haven't even touched upon, even just in passing.
No, we've never discussed it.
No.
But we have next week to get through first.
Yes,
which is Robots of Death. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.